Alright, what's up guys? We are back here with another video and we are continuing, we are here with another movie review and we are continuing our series of reviewing all Stephen King's movies. Because and I still got 4 Children of the Corn movies to go. There's 8 of them. But yeah, Children of the Corn 4, The Gathering. This movie's even worse than the third one. Right off the bat, I'm going to say the only redeemable thing about this movie is the kills. Everything else. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Everything about this movie sucks. The kills are the only thing that is good about this movie. So each of these movies have added along the way, they just added new abilities that they're going to give He Who Walks Behind the Rose. So yeah, they add more abilities for him in this. Well, he's not even mentioned in this. Oh, this movie has everything from flying sickles to blood sacrifice to Ra's al Ghul Lazarus Pit resurrections to even a zombie preacher. This movie got way worse. This series, first of all, this movie doesn't even take place in Gatlin or Hemingford or Chicago. This movie takes place in a whole nother fucking town. So the lore in this movie is Hemingford and Gatlin weren't the only places having problem. In this, there was a preacher kid that was corrupted by adults, and he got the adults a bunch of money, and they sold his soul to the He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and that's what caused the whole resurrection of children shit. And this one predates Gatlin and Hemingford murders, so whatever. I don't even know. So there's that. So the movie is Naomi Watts. She's the main character. So there is a fairly popular, not really, but fairly popular actor in this movie. So she's the main character, and she's coming home from like a college or something to care for her mom because her mom's batshit crazy. She keeps having this vision of this kid that comes to her house with a fever, and he's like all cut up, and then he turns into a fucking zombie at the end of the dream. Oh, we'll get more zombie children later. So you're not confused. He Who Walks Behind the Rose powers now consist of possessing children again, but this time he can make them think that they're a kid that died long ago. So he gives them ghost children's souls. He can also resurrect himself into a human form, and he can also fly now. And he can also spawn sickles out of pools of blood and launch them at people. Also, he's a zombie. And there's another Isaac wannabe that's also a zombie with a half zombie face. And his weakness now is mercury because fuck it, let's give him a weakness. So the children's goal in this is to take the daughter of the little sister of Naomi Watts. And she's like 6, and Naomi Watts is like 25 or something. She's in college. But the little sister, I guess they need another virgin or whatever for the blood sacrifice. And I guess sacrificing the virgin will resurrect He Who Walks Behind the Rose in a human form. Oh, god damn it. Luckily, this movie was only an hour and 20 minutes. I got off easy. Oh, yeah. Children of the Farm Far. The Gathering. So, yeah. She comes home to help her mom, and her mom apparently had 2 more kids. One was her little sister and then her little brother. And her little brother looks to Charles Manson as a idol, and he likes to fix his motorcycle, even though he's like 12 years old. And the little girl is, well, that's pretty much it. She's just a little girl. So, I guess she comes home and little kid's like, oh, fuck you. And then the little girl's like, oh, Naomi Watts is back. But she doesn't say Naomi Watts. She says the character's name. But then we get to meet this old guy named Doc. And he's a friend of the family. And I guess he's been helping the mom before, so getting her ready for Naomi's arrival. So that's not actually her name. I'm just using the actor's name. So, yeah, arrival preparation. So Doc is this fat old guy, and apparently he lived through the Depression in World War II, because he's like 70 in this, but he looks like he's 50. So while Naomi Watts is back home, I guess she's like, oh, Doc, can I continue working for you? Because she's in med school. So apparently she used to work for Doc. So Doc hires her back on. Before she even says anything, he's like, you don't have to say anything, just come back. Oh, okay, so she comes back and this, he who walks behind the rose has the ability to give children, summon grasshoppers and give children fevers. And somehow the fevers also cause the children to be allergic to mercury and have their fillings fall out. Oh, don't even get me started on the two old gypsy women. So this fever breaks out in town, and she starts working with Doc up at the office to stop the fever. Because you gotta stop that fever. And we get an intense scene where they're stopping the fever. So Naomi goes home, and then we get this scene of this old guy who actually played old Matt Damon in Saving Private Ryan. That's literally what I was thinking. Wait, that's the guy that played old Matt Damon in Saving Private Ryan. Because I just recently watched that movie, and I remembered. So that was fun. But he literally gets killed off. So he goes to he's like an alcoholic, and he's drinking whiskey or something, and he goes to the barn. I guess he's a farmer. And he's limping to the farm. He's an old guy. And he's going because apparently there's a well inside the barn. So he goes in there to get some water, and we get a pan out shot inside the well that shows us that there is a decaying body in the well. But then he gets the water out, he starts drinking it, but then bugs come out of the water, and he runs the fuck out of there, but he drops his whiskey, so he tries to reach back for it. And then we get a shot of the dead corpse is now climbing out of the well, and we get the return of another Isaac wannabe. And he's a zombie. So now we got an Isaac wannabe from the first. Well, we have another preacher kid, which is an Isaac wannabe, is what I call him. And that kid is a zombie, apparently. Yay. So he starts stabbing this guy with farm tools, and eventually just ends it by slicing his stomach open with a scythe. Yay. We don't see his body later, but I do gotta say, even though these movies are pretty shitty, I would rather watch the first one over and over than watch these, but the kills are pretty, they've been pretty consistent and good, and very well done in makeup-wise. I think the third one so far has the most kills, but there was still some pretty gnarly kills in this one, even though it was another straight to DVD release. I mean, there were some pretty gnarly kills in this, so I was pretty satisfied with the death side of it, but that was pretty much the only redeeming quality about it. I mean, even Naomi Watts' performance sucks in this. This entire movie sucks. So then we get this scene of Doc. He's at the office, but Naomi isn't there, and this woman comes in with these two twins, and they're acting weird, and they're calling themselves Caleb and Zeke. And Doc knows exactly who they're referring to. There was this guy in the 60s that, this was shortly after the preacher kid was doing his preacher shindig, the original, the kid predating Isaac. And I guess the townspeople, after the preachers dropped him to die, the townspeople took the kid and burned him alive in the cornfield. And then we got the birth of He Who Walks Behind the Rose, because that's apparently, we needed that origin story of a giant black mist that has predator vision and lightning corn. So, yeah, these two I guess Doc back in the 60s there was these two kids, their father was like crazy, and he shot one of them and then cut the other one up. And, yeah, so Doc gets pissed off at them because the kids won't stop calling themselves that. And then, yeah, there's this whole chase scene where he's trying to chase them around the doctor's office. But he gets, I guess they get on this, like, stretcher, and they're wheeling down the hallway, and they cut him in the face with a scalpel. So he's, like, trying to get the fuck out of there, so he's trying to open the door. And, they all magically teleport behind the door that he's trying to get through and lock it. And the stretcher comes back, and a giant pan comes out from under it, and he gets cut in half. So yeah, there's some guts, and his lower half falls. There's not really any off-screen deaths, and there is one off-screen death, but we do get to see the aftermath later. So there's some pretty consistent kills in this. So Doc ends up getting killed. He's the second victim. So then we get this next scene where a black guy that came in earlier with his son had the fever too. And simultaneously all the kids magically didn't have a fever anymore because, yeah, that can happen. So his son, like, was acting weird too. And, he was watching TV, and his mom tells him to get off, I guess. So she goes in the kitchen to talk to the dad. She sees that her son's still on the TV, so she yells at him, and the door to the kitchen locks, and the dad's trying to open it. And the zombie preacher kid magically teleports into the room and completely scythes the shit out of the mom, and we just get a bunch of blood splatters everywhere and a couple gut shots, but it's probably the most off-screen death out of all of them, and we don't get to see a body after it, but she ends up getting killed. So the son ends up, I guess the dad calls the cop because his wife's dead, and the cops come, and the dad gets pulled out, and the sheriff starts talking to him because he was the only one, because they don't think the kid did it, so they're thinking the husband did it, so they're talking to him. Meanwhile, the kid runs off in the cornfield, and the sheriff sees him. So the sheriff chases him, and he gets the upper hand to the sheriff, and the sheriff gets, like, scythed in the back with a giant scythe. So now the sheriff's dead. Oh, man. So then the dad runs off suspiciously, because now they're thinking, oh shit, we found the sheriff's body, so probably the dad did it. No, the dad's trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. The dad runs into these two gypsy women that tell him the story of the preacher kid. And then we get that whole backstory with He Who Walks Behind the Rose. And yeah, then the mom keeps having this dream And so there's this stupid thing in the beginning of the movie that she won't step off of her sidewalk or whatever, but her dream comes true when this little girl comes up to her door and she's not talking to her, and apparently what happens in the dream, she helps whatever kid comes to the door, and the zombie version of the kid tries to attack her and kill her. So he sees the little girl turns into an older kid, and she runs the fuck out of the house, and the kid starts breaking down the door with a giant scythe. So she gets inside her car and leaves. And for some reason, she went to the same barn that guy got killed in. And she gets, like, roped with these, like, vines or whatever, and her head gets impaled with a fucking pitchfork. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Because everybody seems to want to go back to this barn. It makes no sense. It's like, why? So then Naomi Watts has this dream with her little sister, where her little sister turned into a zombie, and then that turns into another dream sequence where, the fucking dream sequences in this one. It turns into another dream sequence where the little girl gets up out of bed and stabs her in the back, and then she wakes up for real. She goes to the doctor's office, and there's a bunch of parents there looking for kids, and they're trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. And Naomi gets one of her friends to help her as a nurse. And she's this black girl, and she was introduced earlier. And she's helping her. And Naomi Watts decides to go out to the barn because apparently everybody wants to go back to this goddamn barn. And she decides to go out there and look for her mom or whatever. I don't know. She's doing something. Well, she's trying to look for Doc, I think. So meanwhile, the black chick is at the hospital by herself, and she starts messing with blood samples, and the blood starts like doing a fucking shining and start multiplying, and there's a giant pool of blood on the floor now, and a giant scythe pops up out of it. Just a scythe. There's no hand holding it or anything. It's just a giant scythe. So she gets the fuck out of there and shuts the door behind her, but then these syringes start magically lifting up off the plate, and they pin her to the wall. And the door, so now she's like pinned up on the door frame, and the door behind her opens, and this giant scythe comes like flinging out of the blood pool and hits her in the back of the head and goes straight through her head. It's another pretty gruesome, it's probably the most gruesome kill of the movie since it goes through and you get to see the whole thing. But it makes no sense how they set up the kill. So then the black chick dies, and I think she's one of the last deaths of the movie. I think there's one more, and that's He Who Walks Behind the Rose again. Yeah, they killed him again. So, she gives the, so now we get to the conclusion where they're sacrificing the little girl. She gets turned into the fucking He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and the black dad and Naomi Watts start working together to save all the children. They start filling the pool of water with mercury, and apparently there's sprinklers in the barn. So they have this, Naomi Watts has the big battle with human form of He Who Walks Behind the Rose. He's flying all over the place with this giant scythe. It's the dumbest scene I've ever seen. And they flip on the mercury, and it fucking melts him like a fucking, it just melts him. And He Who Walks Behind the Rose dies, and the little girl magically shows up in the movie. Children of the Corn 4. The Gathering. I honestly do not think they can get any worse than this. And if they do, just please give it good kills, because that's the only enjoyable thing about these movies. They have good kills in them. Why? So yeah, Children of the Corn 4, The Gathering. I'm giving this movie an F because it's fucking terrible. So remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe.